welcome to the King Arthur episode.
All right.
Yeah! Let's get it going, dude.
Yeah!
It's going to be a follow-up to last week's episode. That is Merlin, right? It's coming out next.
Yes,
pretty positive.
Yes. I don't know. It's been like since 6 weeks
since we've actually gotten together.
Yeah.
So. But I wanted to take a different route this time. So I'm not going to spend like virtually any time at all going the route of the Merlin episode, trying to debate, was he real? Did King Arthur exist? I'm going to kind of breeze through the historicity of that. But I wanted to spend the majority of this time focusing on the myth and ritual symbolism of the allegory of the Arthur myth. Because there is so much information about the, you could say, hermetic philosophy or alchemical symbolism or whatever existing in the story of Arthur. Because there's like no genuine evidence that he did exist as a real person. So I was like, why spend all this time trying to, debate that or whatever?
Yeah. I mean, he's talked about in historical circles and shit, but it's another thing like Merlin. Like, we don't know for sure.
Well, there was like way more evidence that Merlin may have actually existed.
More?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. There's a lot more. We'll just blow through the historicity of Arthur.
Blow on through it.
Yeah, man.
I didn't know that was a word until we started doing this show, and it's like one of my favorite words, I think.
Historicity?
Historicity.
Yeah. It's a good one.
Rolls off the tongue.
It does.
So the earliest reference to King Arthur is in Welsh poetry and chronicles from the 6th and 7th centuries, like the Welsh poem Y Gododdin mentions a warrior named Arthur.
Say it again.
Y Gododdin. Gododdin.
Gododdin.
Y Gododdin.
He got it in.
He got it in.
Oh!
My man Arthur.
My man got it in.
He pulled that sword out of stone and then he got it in. And then Nennius in the 9th century, the historian wrote Historia Brittonum, which includes a list of 12 battles that a man named Arthur supposedly fought. Then you have Geoffrey of Monmouth, the really, I guess he's like one of the really famous writers of King Arthur. He wrote all the Merlin stuff.
Yeah.
In the 12th century, Historia Regum Britanniae, the history of kings of Britain, which significantly expanded the Arthur myth. But it's like considered more literary, like, like how he was about Merlin, writing just this epic story.
Yeah, it's like in place of the lost mythology of Britannia,
right,
if you will.
He wasn't like, this is the true history, he was just
he was like
channeling.
like a pseudo historian,
right?
Like we talked about in the other episode,
right?
Yeah.
There's not really any archaeological evidence, although something really cool is there actually is a genuine sword in the stone.
There is?
Yes, but it's in Tuscany, Italy, and it is a real historical account of a saint named Galgano, who is officially sanctioned as a saint by the Catholic Church, and he was like a warrior who was just this vicious warrior who had so many, like, obviously all victorious battles, and was renowned as a warrior, and then eventually he became like a monk, and he didn't like violence and war anymore, and he wanted to be like an ascetic, kind of living as a hermit up in a monastery. So he like proclaimed before God that he would cease his fighting and all this violence, and he shoved his sword into a stone, and it's regarded as an actual miracle.
No way.
Yep, you can visit it in Tuscany, Italy.
It's still there?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, it's actually there. It's like a real archaeological site.
I'm looking at it now because I just got a new favorite saint.
Can you show me? I just want to see it. Is it on your phone?
Hey, let me get a good picture. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. I would love to see that. That's insane. I have always wondered where that myth came from and if there was an actual sword in the stone.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew about the one at Disney World.
Oh, yeah. You ever tried to pull it?
I think when I was a kid. No way. That is so crazy.
Yeah. It's actually in the stone.
Yo.
And he's like a legit Catholic saint. Like, this is not some like legend. Like, no, he was a real guy.
Dude.
I tried to pull the one at Disney.
You did?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't get it.
There's somebody watching at all times, like randomly.
And they flipped the switch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
guy.
He didn't like me.
He didn't like me either, man.
I think it's usually like for kids, like little
Yeah.
kids and stuff,
Yeah.
which
I
is
mean,
cool.
Throw your boy a
Yeah.
bone.
That's sweet. No, no,
Dude, how
Alex.
cool would I be if I got that thing?
You'd finally be cool.
Yeah.
Finally.
I've actually never seen it like come out. Does it come all the way out, or how does
no.
that?
I don't think so. I think it just comes out like
A little more than it already is.
yeah.
That would be really cool. You know, weird synchronicity actually. I didn't even make this connection till just now, but I've spent like all day and last night researching King Arthur. And right before you guys came here, I was like just scrolling through my social media, and I randomly saw this podcast. It was called like $1 Billion Brand or something. I don't follow this podcast. They just popped up like algorithm. And I didn't even think about it in the moment, but it is a little weird. And the guy was talking about how Disney is like, they're becoming so big now that they're fading away from the magic that they used to have. And he was like, for example, dude, many years ago, it was this really cool thing where, you know, they sit around and they watch all these little kids trying to pull the sword from the stone, and then they let some kid at random pull it, and it's exciting, and everybody around is, you know, so freaked out or whatever. And now it's like, you know, follow this rule to enjoy this experience. And I don't know if you heard this lately, but they had that like Star Wars hotel, you know, and it was like
No.
oh yeah, they came out in Star Wars hotel, and it was like a disaster of epic proportions.
What do you mean? I heard about the hotel. I don't know.
Well, it's just like, you know, people pay like $5,000 and for 2 nights or something like that. And there's this person. I'm not going to go like into extreme detail about this, but there's this person on YouTube who did like a 4-hour vlog video showing like every single thing about this experience that just absolutely sucked. And the whole reason I bring it up is like, it's really weird that I randomly saw this video about the sword and the stone while I'm like spending all day. I didn't even think about it in the moment.
What was one of the things that sucked?
Just like
You're leaving me on a cliffhanger.
like absolute zero level of immersion, like just not what it was advertised to be. The experience was just really like shallow and very corporate. And
I mean, I'm gonna be honest. I don't really feel like I'm part of the Incredibles when I go to the what's it called?
I don't know.
The Incredibles themed one.
What, they have an Incredibles hotel?
Yeah,
They do?
yeah. The one that the monorail goes through.
You mean I don't know, dude. I just don't know.
It's on the. It's the. I'll find out. Hang on.
I just don't know. Okay.
I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
But
Cool, Alex.
so a little bit about Saint Galgano, though. He was an Italian saint from Tuscany. He was obviously like a violent knight, then became a hermit, and he was born in Chius.
The contemporary. Sorry.
That has nothing to do with the Incredibles, bro.
I'm just saying, all of the rooms are Incredible themed.
All of them?
Really?
Yes. At least the one I was in.
Okay. And because that one was Incredibles, all
It's
of
the
them.
Incredibles hotel. Man. The contemporary is so much more than your little Incredibles room, bro. That's crazy, man. So, yeah, I mean that's where the Sword and the Stone comes from. I thought that was really cool.
That's epic.
He died in 1181, and then his sanctity as a saint was recognized in 1185. So 4 years after his death.
And that's like hundreds of years after these myths of King Arthur started emerging. So then they must have changed over time.
Yeah, that's interesting. If I'm reading this correctly, the 12th century writer. Yeah, so in the 12th century, that would be in the 1100s when Geoffrey of Monmouth started writing. I want to look up when he actually wrote that. Historia Regum Britanniae.
I could have sworn when we did the Merlin episode, it's funny because the people watching are like, you just did that last week, but it's actually been a long time.
5 or 6 weeks.
Yeah. I could have sworn he wrote that in like 5 or 6, like the 5th or 6th century or something.
Yeah, but those earlier writings about he wrote different texts, and those were about Merlin and then about Arthur. A lot of the texts that we discussed in the Merlin episode were written even in like the 400s. Remember about Murden, the shitty one.
Yes. The shitty one.
The Celtic druid.
Oh yeah, didn't his name like actually translate to like
The shitty one.
The shitty one.
Yeah, Murden. So they changed it to Merlin, remember?
Because that's what it sounded like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's see. Galgano died in I just had it up, but I had to scroll back. 1185. Historia was actually written 50 years before he plunged the sword in the stone.
Oh, wow.
The King Arthur story.
Whoa.
by Jeffrey Monmouth. So that's really cool.
That's
I
incredible.
didn't really think too deeply about that earlier. So this episode is going to be in 3 phases. I'm going to try to break it up and keep it really concise between the different phases. The first phase, I want to talk about a little bit of my experience in Europe and why I was so like heated to do King Arthur when I got back. And then the second phase is going to be a little bit about this that movie I was telling you about.
Yes.
And then the third phase is going to be about the alchemical symbolism. So when I was in Germany, like 2 weeks ago at this point, I guess, we had our trip to the Netherlands planned. And when we got to the Netherlands, there was like 2 things we had booked on a 3-day trip. And it was the Van Gogh Museum, which was really cool, and the, I think it's called the Rijksmuseum. I think it's the Rijks, yeah. And it's like the main art museum of Amsterdam. And we get there the first day in the Netherlands, and we're eating this amazing Dutch food, and like we're so tired. We've been traveling all day, and we were so hungry, and we're sitting there eating this Dutch food, having this experience, and we're like, wow, this is so awesome. And we were just like, what should we do? Because we didn't want to like overbook our trip. We just wanted to kind of figure out things to do. And I was like, there's this place that's been recommended to me by people in our Discord, and I've seen videos on TikTok about it called the Embassy of the Free Mind, and it's like this hermetic museum. I started looking it up, and I was like, oh my God, dude, it's down the road from our Airbnb.
Oh, no way.
Like, we got to go. Yeah, it was on the same street. It's a series of canals in Amsterdam, so it's kind of like it's kind of like a circle, and the streets blossom out in a circle, and they just go around the central point or whatever.
Oh, that's cool.
So these streets are like really long semicircles around the canal, and we were here, and then the museum was up on that same street. So I was like, dude, we got to go. So I was telling my wife, like, I want to book this. We can do whatever you want. I want to do this. And I started reading into it a little bit and found out that the Netherlands, particularly Amsterdam, is actually the hermetic capital of the world. Right? I was like, what? I didn't know that either.
Amsterdam is?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's the hermetic capital of the world.
Why? I mean, does it
tell you.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a reason.
Okay.
Because in the medieval ages and the Renaissance era, when the Rosicrucians were starting to spread, you obviously had like Templars during the Crusades, and you had all these different traditions, Kabbalah, and then Masonry was beginning to form, and obviously you had the alchemical Renaissance, and just all of this knowledge was beginning to like explode in the undercurrent of philosophical thought in Europe. The church was like, oh shit, and they like had this brutal oppression towards it, and just slaughtering people, slaughtering anybody that opposed, the official doctrine of the church. And the Netherlands, it's funny because when you think about Amsterdam, you think about like, yeah, dude, you can go there to get like mushrooms, go to the red light district and get weed, and it's like this
very free.
Yeah,
open.
but like it's so much deeper than that. It actually for hundreds of years has been like the probably most like free thought centric capital of Europe in those days. So yeah, so like in the medieval ages and in the Renaissance era, when all this stuff was happening, these philosophers would escape to the Netherlands. And they would take their scrolls and their texts, and they would go and they would seek refuge in the Netherlands.
No way.
Yep. And I think it was the 17th century. I don't know. I have to look it up because I wasn't prepared to talk about this hermetic philosopher. But there was like a really famous hermetic philosopher from Amsterdam named, I think, Baruch de Spinoza. He's like a really famous hermetic philosopher in history. And he started like, accumulating all these texts and all this knowledge. And then over time, there just became this large volume of texts building in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, they're just like getting it together, and the Embassy of the Free Mind was formed. And there's like 30,000 texts. There's 30,000 books at this institute. It's the largest hermetic library in the world.
That's so incredible. Have you gotten to the part in I'm certain you have, in One Piece, where it talks about like where Robin came from?
Yeah.
That sounds exactly like that. Like all of these mystics like sought refuge in this one place, and they all had this like place where they gathered all their findings and their scrolls and their like and kind of hid it there.
Yep.
Like hid it from the world because they were being persecuted for that knowledge.
Baruch Spinoza, not D. Spinoza. It's Baruch Spinoza.
Baruch
Yep.
Spinoza.
And then there was another alchemist that lived that like hoarded a lot of these texts and started the embassy, because it's only been a museum, I think, for like the last 7 years or something, and before that it was just a private library that was being built over time. And they were like, well, hey, we can open this to the public, and let them.
That's that recent.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I mean, I did a quick little search on the history of the Institute the other day, and it's just crazy. Like, I had no clue that this was the hermetic capital of the world. And they have like 30,000 books there, and they have like a whole museum exhibit where you can like go into different rooms and read like so many different pamphlets and diagrams and literal real like ancient artifacts that were magical relics, and like books attributed to Hermes Trismegistus. And like one thing that got my attention was there was this massive golden vase that had, I can't remember if it was 12 plates, and there were two halves of this thing, and it was like the top half was depicting all around different images on each side of it wasn't like a pure circular vase. It had like faces, like a hexagon or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like on the top half was the story of Jesus, the gospel.
Whoa.
And then on the bottom half was mirroring the story, but it was showing like the esoteric version of
Like
the gospel
truths of.
with the Holy Grail.
Oh, come on.
And
That's sick.
Yeah, and there was like little monuments to the Grail myth and the legends of King Arthur and stuff. And I was like, dude, this is so deep. And we've got the Merlin episode come out right when I get back from Europe. And I was like, I already had mentioned on the episode we'll do a King Arthur follow up. So I was like, this is too timely. So like it was just really mind blowing. Like, I spent an hour there. I only had an hour and a half because by the time I got there, they closed in an hour and a half. And I spent an hour there just reading all the pamphlets and some of their little booklets and stuff. And Jenny was like, dude, they close in 30 minutes. Like, you need to get up and actually walk around. And I'm like, oh shit. So I get up, I start running around, speed reading all the rest of the stuff. And in the back courtyard, they had like a massive wall with the emerald tablets of Thoth inscribed on it. And they had this like staircase leading down to the courtyard with like the 7 stages of the alchemical process.
That is so
Which is weird.
cool.
There's like 4 steps of the alchemical process, and then there's the 7 stages, and they're separate things, but they both have significance or whatever. I don't know. But in this episode, we're going to focus on the 4 steps of the alchemical process. So long story short, I'm going to move on from the Amsterdam thing. I just wanted to say...
Are you allowed to take pictures in there?
Oh, yeah,
Did you take pictures?
Yeah, dude.
I want to see some.
Yeah, I've got tons of them.
That sounds awesome.
And I took pictures of a lot of the artifacts in there. Some of these were like many centuries old books, like written in like... I don't know, like Greek, some of them maybe Latin, just like they had a private room where you had to schedule like a private access tour in advance to go into a locked room with museum curators to see like really, really rare artifacts. Obviously, I didn't get to see them because I didn't know that was an option.
Sure, yeah.
But they have some sweet stuff. So in addition to the 30,000 books that they have 2,000 books that are sitting upstairs in a library for public access. Like
you can just grab them and go and read them. And
yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and if you like them, you can buy them.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really cool, dude. It's like...
There can't be many places like that in the world.
Right. So when I was being there, I was like, this is so cool. And when you read their presentation of this information, it just like made me really... because... First of all, I'm in Europe, right? I'm not in America, which is like completely different philosophically than the rest of the world. I mean, America is very simple-minded philosophically compared to, places in Asia or places in Europe where these alchemical movements actually happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like the wealth of information you can find there is so much deeper than, a lot of the stuff that you could find in museums in America. So
yeah, well, those places are also infinitely older.
Exactly.
America's a few hundred years old. These places are thousands of years old.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the thing that was clicking in my brain was like, dude, I am in a place where this alchemical hermetic thought actually was historically happening.
Like it kind of low-key originated, not literally, but like that's where people went when they knew about this stuff and they were seeking refuge and like conferring with one another like about this stuff. That's so sick.
Yeah, it was just cool. It was kind of like mind-altering being there and like reading about this stuff. And Yeah, and I was honestly really shocked at like the number of people that were coming into the institute and just like spending time there and just reading through stuff, and it was so like commonly accepted. Oh yeah, it's a hermetic place.
Yeah.
It's you ask somebody in America, what do you know about hermeticism? They're like, what's that?
Yeah, nobody
You know
knows
what I mean?
that is.
The vibe, the attitude about it was so common there that I was like, this is really cool. So anyway, after leaving the institute and going back to Germany for several days, and then we flew home to America. In that phase where I like left the Netherlands and went back to Germany, there was quite a few periods of time where obviously when I'm traveling in Europe, I'm on airplane mode. I can't use my signal. So I'm like, well, I mean, let me look at my Kindle and see if I have any books downloaded. Oh, sweet. I have the Secret Teaching of All Ages downloaded. So I just started power reading it. I'm not even close to finishing it. But I started just having my mind blown constantly over and over and over by the Secret Teaching of All Ages. So I was just like, man, I really should like pull all of the Arthurian symbolism from the Secret Teaching of All Ages for the episode. So that's where we're going to go in phase 1. Nice. So I'm going to start. We're going to talk about the Manly P. Hall interpretation of the Arthurian myth. So okay, Manly P. Hall, I'm not sure where that book is because all my books are still packed up from moving, but I have the book. It used to sit right beside me in our old studio. Yeah. But it's a really good book. I started reading it, I don't know, like 7 years ago, and I don't think I was mature enough to really like commit to it. When I say mature, I mean like mature enough in all of this stuff. I was still getting my feet wet in a lot of this esoteric conversation, and I don't think that I was really ready to like commit to reading the book. But now I'm reading it and I'm like, holy shit, this is probably the deepest thing I've ever read. And it just like shotgun blasts pretty much every esoteric tradition and goes really deep into like what they're about, what the symbols mean, and really demystifies them. And it makes this grand connection between like all of the ancient wisdom traditions.
Oh, cool.
Which is like what we've been trying to do on the show. So I'm like, dude, this is the book for me.
The Venn diagram.
Yeah. And it's really deep, dude. So I'm going to get into that. I'm going to get into the Secret Teaching All Ages of Interpretation. So we're going to start with the Round Table of King Arthur from Manly P. Hall. And then this is in his, what he does a lot is he references a lot of older texts. And by the way, this was written in the 1920s. So if that wasn't mind-blowing enough that this material has been around the whole time, even though a lot of us are just now hearing about it, pretty crazy.
Yeah.
From Jennings, the Rosicrucians, their rites and mysteries, according to tradition. Arthur, when a boy of 15, was crowned king of Britain in AD 516. Soon after his ascension to the throne, he founded the Order of the Knights of the Round Table at Windsor. Thereafter, the knights met annually at Carlion, I don't know how to say it, Winchester, or at Camelot to celebrate Pentecost. From all parts of Europe came the brave and the bold, seeking admission into his noble order of British knighthood. Nobility, virtue, and valor were its requirements, and those possessing these qualities to a marked degree were welcome to King Arthur's court. Having gathered the bravest and noblest knights of Europe about him, King Arthur chose 24 who excelled all the others in daring and integrity and formed of them his circle of the Round Table. According to his legend, each of these knights was so great in dignity and power that none could occupy a more exalted seat than another. So when they gathered at the table to celebrate the anniversary of their foundation, it was necessary to use a round table that all might occupy chairs of equal importance. While it's probable that the Order of the Round Table had its distinctive rituals and symbols, the knowledge of them has not survived the ages. Elias Ashmole, in his volume on the Order of the Garter, inserted a double-page plate showing the insignia of all the orders of knighthood, the block set aside for the symbol of the Round Table being left blank. The chief reason for the loss of symbolism of the Round Table was the untimely death of King Arthur upon the field of Camblin in 542 AD, in the 41st year of his life. While he destroyed his bitter enemy Mordred in this famous battle, it cost him not only his own life, but the lives of nearly all the knights of the Round Table who died defending their commander. It's a dark, grisly end, right?
Damn.
King Arthur, he's slaughtered in battle.
Yeah, and also imagine being like a 15, 16-year-old kid and all of these like seasoned veteran knights, like noble knights, are seeking you and seeking to be at your table, and like that's wild. And 41. 41.
Right.
Which honestly, for the time, is like, that's
It's pretty old.
pretty
man.
much a full
Man,
life.
you're a geezer.
Yeah, that's pretty much like a full life.
I mean, you've survived the plague, man.
Yeah. Wow.
Might have about half your teeth left, but
I was talking to my coworker the other day, and I was like, dude, why do I hurt so much all of a sudden? And he was like, you just turned 30.
Yeah, you're 30.
He was like, you just turned 30. And I was like, so? And he was like, honestly, I don't think humans were meant to live past 30. And I was like, what the? That's so grim.
Dude, the change is real, bro. Like,
Yeah.
for me, it was psychological.
Yeah, it's probably partially psychosomatic, but I do feel like it's very likely that I will most likely have or already do have rheumatoid arthritis. But like when I turned 30, I started like feeling like I have the symptoms of it.
I feel like the way that works is like, dude, you've already been feeling that since your late 20s, probably.
It's true.
But now that you're 30, you're like, oh, crap.
You see it through that lens.
Yeah,
That's
it's
gotta be-
psychological.
For sure. I definitely have felt the symptoms for years, but
Right.
now that I'm 30, I'm like, oh my God, I'm
older.
I'm falling apart.
Right.
Yeah.
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 I feel that, man.
That's tough.
Shut up.
What are you, like 22?
Don't gaslight him, bro. What are you? You're 26.
In 27 days, yeah.
You'll be 26 this month?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I actually thought I was 25, and I'm not gaslighting. I lose track, man.
Man,
I should know that. We're 5 years apart in age.
Yeah.
I should know that.
We should also know it because we're his friend, but
Wait, we are his friend?
yeah, we're your friend. Yeah.
yeah, we are.
We together share the burden of being your friend because
And the bond.
Yeah, but I mean more so the burden. It's a lot to carry for one person.
It's a stressful bond.
so
We're stress bonded, but I'm the stress.
yes, exactly.
You're the H and we're the 2O.
What? You're the H and we're the 2. I'm not even gonna ask.
Water.
I get it.
Yeah.
I get that part.
I'm just
The
saying, we
flow
are
is
bonded
ridiculous.
with you.
we are bonded with you. I don't know what your relationship is like on the other side of it, but
It's just nothing but gas, bro.
hydrogen. Yeah.
So we left with a dark ending of King Arthur, but we're gonna come to a happy ending with that. You know, because and that's the thing. I know I just like rapidly shifted
That's
right
okay.
back into the Arthur story, but
all right.
we've got some more to cover here. So virtually every version of King Arthur does end with him pretty much dying. Some dark ending. Many of them end with his wife Guinevere being in like a love triangle with Lancelot, and they betray him. And Mordred, by the way, in every version of King Arthur is either his son or his nephew. So he has this like blood feud with his rival Mordred, who he kills in battle, but then receives a mortal wound and dies for Mordred. So it is always like this grim end of King Arthur.
Yeah.
But, you know, maybe it's not as bad as we thought. So now we're going to get into the Arthurian cycle and the legend of the Holy Grail. We're going to spend a little bit more time on the Grail, which is pretty deep. The origin of the Grail myth, as of nearly every other element in the great drama, is curiously elusive. Sufficient foundation for it may be found in the folklore of the British Isles, which contains many accounts of magic cauldrons, kettles, cups, and drinking horns. The earliest Grail legends describe the cup as a veritable horn of plenty. Its contents were inexhaustible, and those who served it never hungered or thirsted. One account states that no matter how desperately ill a person might be, he could not die within the 8 days of beholding the cup. Some authorities believe the Holy Grail to be the perpetuation of the Holy Cup used in the rites of Adonis and Attis. A communion cup or chalice was used in several of the ancient mysteries, and the god Bacchus is frequently symbolized in the form of a vase, cup, or urn. In nature worship, the ever-flowing grail signifies the bounty of the harvest by which the life of man is sustained, like Mercury's bottomless pitcher. It is the inexhaustible fountain of a natural resource. From the evidence at hand, it would indeed be erroneous to ascribe a purely Christian origin or an origin to the grail symbolism. In the Arthurian cycle appears a strange and mysterious figure, Merlin, the magician. In one of the legends concerning him, it is declared that when Jesus was sent to liberate the world from the bondage of evil, the adversary determined to send an antichrist to undo his labors. The devil, therefore, in the form of a horrible dragon, overshadowed a young woman who had taken refuge in sanctuary to escape the evil which had destroyed her family. When Merlin, her child, was born, he partook of the characteristics of his human mother and demon father. Merlin, however, did not serve the powers of darkness, but being converted to the true light, retained only 2 of the supernatural powers inherited from his father, prophecy and miracle working. The story of Merlin's infernal father must really be considered. Now, I'm just going to take a quick pause and say this is where Manly P. Hall is genius, because for every one of these mystery traditions, he tells you, like, here's the legend, here's what it really means.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Like the interpretation, the symbolism.
Yeah, the esoteric, like, truth behind
Significant,
it.
yeah.
Yeah. The story of Merlin's infernal father must really be considered as an allegorical allusion to the fact that he was a philosophical son of the serpent or dragon, a title applied to all initiates of the mysteries, who thus acknowledged nature as their mortal mother and wisdom in the form of the serpent or dragon as their immortal father. Confusion of the dragon and serpent. Remember, you said in the other episode that Merlin was a title given to initiates.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Manly P. Hall agrees.
Oh, wow.
Let me pick back up where I was. Confusion of the dragon and serpent with the powers of evil has resulted as an inevitable consequence for misinterpretation of the early chapters of Genesis. Arthur, while an infant, was given into the keeping of Merlin, the mage, and in his youth instructed by him in the secret doctrine and probably initiated into the deepest secrets of natural magic. With Merlin's assistance, Arthur became the leading general of Britain, a degree of dignity which has been confused with kingship. Which that's true. The historicity of Arthur, they believe that if he existed, he was probably actually a general, like a war general,
not like a king.
Yes,
but like
and I'm going to get into this later, but Arthur may have also been a title, and not like an actual birth name.
No way.
Yep.
So these theosophists they're onto something.
After Arthur had drawn the sword of Bran's stock from the anvil and thus established his divine right to leadership, Merlin further assisted him to secure from the Lady of the Lake the sacred sword, Excalibur. Mm-hmm. And that's true of the myth, too. It's a myth. He actually doesn't, in some versions, he doesn't pull Excalibur. He just pulls the sword, Bran's stock.
Yeah.
And then Merlin's like, all right, let's go get Excalibur.
Yeah.
You know? But in some versions, he just pulls Excalibur.
Uh-huh.
After the establishment of the Round Table, having fulfilled his duty, Merlin disappears, according to one account vanishing into thin air, where he still exists as a shadow communicating at will with mortals.
That's just like the Merlin shit.
I know.
Dude. What?
According to another, retiring of his own accord into a great stone vault, from which he sealed within, which we also talked about that too.
Yeah.
It is reasonably certain that many legends regarding Charlemagne were later associated with Arthur, who is most famous for establishing the Order of the Round Table at Winchester. Reliable information is not to be had concerning the ceremonies and initiatory rituals of the Round Table. In one story, the table was endowed with the powers of expansion and contraction so that 15 or 1,500 could be seated around it according to whatever need might arise. The most common accounts fix the number of knights who could be seated at one time at the Round Table at either 12 or 24. Here we go. The 12 signified the zodiac and also the apostles of Jesus. The knights' names and also their heraldic arms were emblazoned upon their chairs. When 24 are shown seated at the table, each of the 12 signs of the zodiac is divided into 2 parts, a light and a dark half, to signify the nocturnal and diurnal phases of each sign.
Yin yang.
Exactly. And the sun and the moon, the light and the dark. As each sign of the zodiac is ascending for 2 hours of every day, so the 24 knights represent the hours, the 24 elders before the throne in Revelation, and the 24 Persian deities who represent the spirits of the divisions of the day. In the center of the table was the symbolic rose of the passion of our Lord Jesus Christ, the symbol of resurrection, and that he rose from the dead.
Oh, damn. They're doing wordplay.
There was also a mysterious empty seat called the Siege Perilous, in which none might sit except he who was successful in his quest for the Holy Grail. And the personality of Arthur is to be found. Now, this is where I really want people to pay attention. I love looking up and seeing it's in 33 minutes too.
Hey.
You know, it might not be to them, but it is to us,
Yeah.
because we cut a little bit before we actually start recording. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay. In the personality of Arthur, this is the most important part of all of it, and the rest of the conversation is going to kind of piggyback on this, okay? So in the personality of Arthur is to be found a new form of the ever-recurrent cosmic myth. The Prince of Britain is the sun. His knights are the zodiac, and his flashing sword may be the sun's ray with which he fights and vanquishes the dragons of darkness, or it may represent the earth's axis. Arthur's round table is the universe, the siege perilous, the throne of the perfect man. In its terrestrial sense, Arthur was the grand master of a secret Christian Masonic brotherhood of philosophic mystics who turned themselves knights. Arthur received the exalted position of Grand Master of these knights because he had faithfully accomplished the withdrawal of the sword, or the spirit, from the anvil of the base metals, his lower nature. As invariably happens, the historical Arthur soon was confused with the allegories and myths of his order until now the two are inseparable. So he dies in the field of Camblin, the mysteries cease, and esoterically he's taken away on a black barge, as is so beautifully described by Tennyson in his Morte d'Arthur. The great sword Excalibur was also cast back into the waters of eternity, all of which is a vivid portrayal of the descent of cosmic night at the end of the day of universal manifestation. The body of the historical Arthur, probably interred at Glastonbury Abbey, a building closely identified with the mystic rites of both the Grail and the Arthurian cycle. The medieval Rosicrucians were undoubtedly in possession of the true secret of the Arthurian cycle and the Grail legend, much of their symbolism having been incorporated into that order, which is true. It's true. When I studied briefly with Robert Gilbert, Dr. Robert Gilbert, an amazing man, and people should look him up. He's like blowing up on the internet now.
Really?
Oh yeah, dude. He's making the rounds, dude. He's getting the recognition that he deserves. And when I first was introduced to Dr. Robert Gilbert, and he like gave me some of his courses and let me go through his material. He has entire courses on like Rosicrucianism and Grail traditions.
Huh.
There's a connection between the Grail myth and
Oh, dude, yeah, they had a rose in the middle of the table.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Wow, dude, that's so incredible. That's like very archetypal and
Right.
and alchemical, like the symbolism of the round table and the knights and Arthur.
The next section we're going to talk about the rose a little bit too. But yeah, so the medieval Rosicrucians were undoubtedly in possession of the true secret of the Arthurian cycle and the Grail legend, much of their symbolism having been incorporated into that order. Though the most obvious of all keys to the Christos mystery, the Grail legend, has received the least consideration. So we're getting to the end of phase 1 here, and then we'll kind of process some of this stuff, but I'm just going to blow through and finish this part. So the crucified rose. The original, and again, this is still all from Secret Teaching.
Yeah.
This is different segments of the Secret Teaching of all ages.
Gotcha.
The original symbol of the Rosicrucian fraternity was a hieroglyphic rose crucified upon a cross. The cross was often raised upon a 3-stepped Calvary. Occasionally, the symbol of a cross rising from a rose was used in connection with their activities. The Rosicrucian rose was drawn upon the round table of King Arthur and is the central motif for the links forming the chain from which the Great George is suspended among the jewels of the Order of the Garter. Hargrave Jennings suspects this order of having some connection with the Rosicrucians. The Holy Grail. This is the last part of this phase of the episode. This part's pretty deep. The Holy Grail, like the sapphire, this is a Greek word, I believe. I don't know how to pronounce it, but Shathia, I think it's a Greek word. The lapis exilis, crown jewel of the archangel Lucifer, fell from heaven. Michael, the archangel of the sun and the hidden god of Israel, at the head of the angelic host, swooped down upon Lucifer and his legions of rebellious spirits. During the conflict, Michael, with his flaming sword, struck the flashing lapis exilis from the coronet of his adversary, and the green stone fell through all the celestial rings into the dark, immeasurable abyss. I want to pause there. Chintamani stone, the wishing stone. Remember that?
Yeah.
The green stone that falls, and you know, it's the wishing stone of Eastern philosophy.
Oh, my God.
Or how about this? Moldavite, the crystal that's a multi-billion-year-old meteorite that's found in places in, I believe, Asia and Europe that people think might be this stone. It's green.
That's so wild, too, because lapis is usually blue.
This is not lapis lazuli. This is a different stone, the lapis exilis. Many people in modern times believe that this actual stone may have been the Moldavite meteorite.
Oh, no way.
And if you look into Moldavite, folks at home, It is one of the most powerful crystals. It's regarded as like a very, very powerful crystal.
See, everybody, like, I see it everywhere. I've seen it on some huge. They talked about it on Joe Rogan.
And it's super expensive.
Yeah.
And a lot of crystal shops won't even let you bring it inside.
Why?
Because they're like, I don't want to fucking with our energy.
No.
Of all the stuff.
way.
I've had that happen. I bought them.
No.
I'm serious.
Somebody told you, like.
Somebody told me that. I was like, hey, I bought a piece of moldavite at a different store. And this was a gem shop downtown that does like wrappings. And I was like, if I brought it in, would you guys like wire wrap it for me so I could make a necklace? And they're like, sorry, you can't bring that in here. We don't want it messing with our. I'm serious, dude.
What?
Yeah, there's like a serious belief around moldavite.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was interesting. You know, I have actually read before. I might have talked about it on the episode one time, a long time ago, but there is a belief that moldavite may have been the crystal that was on the Holy Grail. And then in this ancient myth, you see this stone that was on the Archangel Lucifer, and, you know, he's cast out and the stone falls to the earth and then it's put in the Grail. I love the connection there.
Yeah, that would explain some of the suspicion and the significance why this stone is, like, supposedly so powerful.
And then I think it's in Tibetan Buddhism. They have the Chintamani stone, which is a similar myth, and it's like this green gem that is like the wishing stone, like it's like the philosopher's stone, you know.
Yeah.
So picking up where I left off, out of Lucifer's radiant gem was fashioned the sangreal, or the Holy Grail, from which Christ is said to have drunk at the Last Supper. Though some controversy exists as to whether the Grail was a cup or a platter, it is generally depicted in art as a chalice of considerable size and unusual beauty. According to the legend, Joseph of Arimathea brought the Grail, or Arimathea, whatever, brought the Grail cup to the place of the crucifixion, and in it caught the blood pouring from the wounds of the dying Nazarene. Later, Joseph, who had become custodian of the sacred relics, the sangreal, and the spear of Longinus, which I guess is the spear of destiny that stabbed Jesus, carried them into a distant country. According to one version, his descendants finally placed these relics in Glastonbury Abbey in England. According to another, in a wonderful castle on Mount Salvet, Spain, built by angels in a single night. Under the name of Preston John, Parsifal, the last of the Grail kings, carried the holy cup with him into India, and it disappeared forever from the Western world. Subsequent search for the sangreal was the motif for much of the knight-errantry of the Arthurian legends and the ceremonials of the Round Table. See the Mort d'Arthur. No adequate interpretation that has ever been given to the Grail mysteries, or has ever been given to the Grail mysteries. Some believe the Knights of the Holy Grail to have been a powerful organization of Christian mystics, perpetuating the ancient wisdom under the rituals and sacraments of the oracular cup. The quest for the Holy Grail is the eternal search for truth, and Albert G. Mackey sees it in a variation of the Masonic legend of the lost word so long sought by the brethren of the craft. There's also evidence to support the claim that the story of the Grail is an elaboration of an early pagan nature myth, which has been preserved by reason of the subtle manner in which was engrafted upon the cult of Christianity. Which, for anybody who's offended by that, in ancient times, Christianity was literally
a cult.
It was.
Yeah,
because they practiced in underground sepulchers and temples, and they had to like hide from, you know, the Romans at the time. So like it actually was a cult. This is not trying to like smear.
It's not saying modern Christianity is a cult.
Yeah,
it's saying that literally at one point it was a cult.
Right. I just wanted to clarify that for people who might not,
like, out of necessity.
Right.
So that they wouldn't
to survive.
Killed. Yeah.
Right. From this particular viewpoint, the Holy Grail is undoubtedly a type of the ark or vessel in which the life of the world and is preserved, and therefore is significant of the body of the Great Mother, nature. Its green color relates it to Venus and to the mystery of generation, also to the Islamic faith, whose sacred color is green and whose Sabbath is Friday, the day of Venus. In witchcraft, they call it the witch's Sabbath, or the day of Frigga, you know. The Holy Grail is a symbol of both. I was thinking, should I make a joke? I was thinking, should I make a joke about Frigga? And I was like, I better not.
Well, I looked at Alex, and he was leaned back. You should show yourself right now. It'd be really funny. He was leaned back like that, and he was just nodding at me and smiling when you said Frigga.
He don't even want to be here, bro. He don't give a Frigga.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
I was debating it.
He don't give not one Frigga.
Yeah. Mother Frigga. Literally, bro.
Yeah.
The Holy Grail is a symbol both of the lower or irrational world and of the bodily nature of man, because both are receptacles for the living essences of the superior worlds. Such is the mystery of the redeeming blood, which, descending into the condition of death, overcomes the last enemy by ensouling all substance with its own immortality. To the Christian, whose mystic faith especially emphasizes the love element, the Holy Grail typifies the heart in which continually swirls the living water of eternal life. Moreover, to the Christian, the search for the Holy Grail is the search for the real self. When found, is the consummation of the magnum opus, or in alchemy, this is known as the great work, the turning of the lead into gold, which we're going to go way more into that later. The Holy Cup can
And
be...
then you get to sit at that chair that nobody gets to sit in, right?
Exactly. Yes. In his mystic poem, I skipped one. The Holy Cup can be discovered only by those who have raised themselves above the limitations of sensuous existence, ascending from our animalistic nature, conquering our material self, and rising into spiritual self. Remember, just like you just said, the ones who sit at this chair are the ones who found the Holy Grail. Well, it's a metaphor. Finding the Holy Grail is about performing the alchemical great work. In his mystic poem, The Vision of Sir Launfal, James Russell Lowell discloses the true nature of the Holy Grail by showing that it is visible only to a certain state of spiritual consciousness. Only upon returning from the vain pursuit of haughty ambition did the aged and broken knight see in the transformed leper's cup the glowing chalice of his lifelong dream. Some writers trace a similarity between the Grail legend and the stories of the martyred sun gods whose blood descending from heaven into the earth was caught in the cup of matter and liberated therefrom by the initiatory rites.
It's called the Cup of Matter, Matter.
Well, the point here is that he's making a connection that between all, and there's way more context to this book, and this is one little segment. And the point that he's making in this entire book, that there is one secret primordial tradition between all of these ancient wisdom traditions.
Right.
And it's that we have descended here into matter as parts of the true spiritual reality, and that our whole game here is to go through the initiations which served to wake us up to our true nature. Mm-hmm. So he's saying that's what he's saying. The worldly cup of matter.
Yeah.
That the Grail is symbolic of us being in matter, and that we are liberated from matter by the initiatory rites, going through the awakening process. The Holy Grail may also be the seed pod so frequently employed in the ancient mysteries as an emblem of germination and resurrection, and if the cup-like shape of the Grail be derived from the flower, it signifies the regeneration and spiritualization of the generative forces of man. So that's all the Manly P. Hall stuff. But what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I wouldn't expect anything less from Manly P. Hall. I mean, it's always about the pursuit of finding the overlap and the truth in the overlap, and it's yet another allegory of ascension,
right?
Of enlightenment, the path of enlightenment. Like whoever sits at that chair is someone who reached enlightenment through the alchemical process of transfiguring the matter into spirit, the lead into gold. It's beautiful.
It's deep, dude.
Absolutely.
I knew that. Here's the thing. For many years, I've known that the Arthurian legend was esoteric or whatever, but I never really figured that I would get to decipher that.
Yeah, dissect it.
Because here's the thing, dude. When you're dabbling into this world of esoteric traditions and alchemy and all this stuff, it's really hard at first when you're new to be is this an accurate source?
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is what I'm reading even true? Is this accurate? And it's really cool to read this stuff from the lens of somebody who, by the way, I mean, Manly P. Hall was brilliant, dude. We've talked about him before. He was so spot on with his knowledge that the Freemasons in America, I don't know what lodge it was. Maybe it was Blue Lodge, if I'm not mistaken. I really don't know. I'm not a Mason. I don't intimately know what chapters are here and there, but they initiated him as an honorary 33rd degree.
Wow.
If you remember, because he was so spot on with his material.
Yeah, he was obviously very well researched and cross-referenced all of his sources, and you cross-reference his sources, they're all legitimate. That's really the first step of figuring out the sources that you can trust is you look into their cited sources and double check the stuff that they're claiming, and if it's legit, then you can trust this person. And Manly P. Hall is very much somebody who cites the sources, only references legitimate sources. Like it's real stuff.
Right.
It's still mind-blowing that someone could even like conceive of these archetypal energies and like the poetry of it all, like the symbolism of it all.
Because it is like poetry.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, look at what's his name? The Joffrey of Monmouth.
Yeah.
He's literally writing poetry, like
Right.
actual poetry, but telling a myth. And in reality, the myth that he's telling is an allegory. It's like it's hard for me to even conceive of doing something like that now.
Right.
This is
Star Wars.
I mean,
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
it's
that's why we talk about movies all the time, you know?
yeah, because people still are doing it now. This is something that's always been around. We're talking about the 4th, 5th century. Like,
Yeah.
to even conceive of this stuff, and you know, they didn't have the same resources that we have so readily available today.
Right.
They're figuring this stuff out the old-fashioned way for themselves and decoding the poetry and symbolism of it all. It's mind-blowing.
I can't stop thinking about how many thousands of hours these people back then in these times spent in libraries.
That's
like
what- that's
accumulating
what
this
they
knowledge.
did.
You know what's crazy, dude? Manly P. Hall published this book in the 1920s.
Mm-hmm.
He was like 21.
No way.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
On God, I'm gonna look it up right now.
I had fully assumed like this man,
Like an old man.
yes, yes, like at very least in his 60s, devoted his life to learning all of this stuff. But this is obviously somebody who like got the bug for it really early and just devoted all of their time to like.
Oh wow, dude! I just googled the book. It's on CIA.gov. It's so good.
No way.
Yeah, he was he was Canadian. I didn't know that. Alex, can you look up what age he was when he? I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I'm pretty sure he was like 21, and I'm pretty sure it came out in 1922. That's just based on
the age he was when he
wrote the
When he-
secret.
right.
Is it the secret teaching of all ages?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The secret teachings. Anyway, so yeah, it's just mind blowing, man. And I'm really like, especially after going to the Institute, because the Embassy of the Free Mind. I mean,
Yeah.
and again, this is not like, you know, my experience at the Monroe Institute. This is not like that at all. The Embassy of the Free Mind is a public library with like museum elements. I'm not like in touch with these people. I don't know. I just went there and I nerded out and read all the connections, and it really inspired me. I don't want people to think that, you know, something that it's not. But they had so much material available. And the connections that they had between like Hermetic philosophy and Hermes Trismegistus and Rosicrucianism, and like giving like very detailed historical descriptions of these orders. And like, I don't remember seeing much on Freemasonry, but I don't remember coming across that much. They talked a little bit about like the Illuminati and the historical version of that. And it was really cool reading this stuff, and then reading The Secret Teaching of All Ages. There's such an overlap between the material in his book and the material I was reading there.
So he was born in 1901, and
Oh my God, he was 21.
the book came out in 1928, so
Oh.
he was 27.
Oh, wow. It's still crazy, dude.
That's
Yeah, 27.
still.
It's younger than us.
I know. I couldn't imagine doing something like that right now.
Right.
Yeah, I'd basically have to start writing that book now to get it out when I'm 27.
Yeah,
Let alone have all of the cross-referenced knowledge that is.
Well, if I combine you two, I have one friend, and I think that
Yeah.
might help me write
Which
the
is
book.
true, and don't you ever forget it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, it's a big book, man. The edition I have is like 700 plus pages, and it just keeps hitting. The introduction of the book before chapter 1 is like 1,000-year history of every philosopher that's ever existed. It's crazy. It takes you back to the.
27, dude.
Yeah.
The Initiates of the Flame
I want to read that one next.
was published in 1922, so he was 21 for that. But he
Ah.
published 2 books that year in 1922, and then
He's just writing them both at the same time.
and then
what a
1928, 1931, 1944, 1942, and that's it.
He had a very mysterious death, if you guys recall.
I don't
I
remember.
wasn't there.
And several of his. Yeah, I mean, you know, but I Googled it.
That's a thing.
I wasn't there either. But apparently, like, he was murdered. And,
Dude, it was the day after my birthday.
what, when he was murdered?
August 29th, yeah. Whoa. 1990, so like a day and 8 years before I was born.
Whoa, dude.
Wait, he died in 1990?
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Damn,
He was old,
he
dude.
lived to be
He's
old.
pretty cool. He's like intense looking, dude.
Relation. Let me see.
He's got like
Bro, he's like the H.P.
Well,
Lovecraft of the occult.
When your name is Manly, I would assume
he's
you
got
look.
beautiful eyes. Look
Yeah.
at that shit.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like a drawing.
they just put emphasis on the eyes.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, I thought all that stuff at Manly P Hall was super cool about King Arthur. Now I'm gonna move to the movie. This won't take nearly as long, and then we're gonna wrap it up with the like actual kind of like detailed alchemical process of the Arthur myth, which is really cool. So I saw the movie. I started it last night or like sometime yesterday, and then I had a bunch of other stuff I had to get around to, and I couldn't finish it till today. It was really cool. It's
The movie is called.
I think it's called King Arthur: The Legend of the Sword. It's the one that came out in 2017. And I remember when that movie came out, I was really interested in watching it, but for whatever reason, I didn't. I don't know. I guess I moved to Wilmington at the time with Jenny, and it was just like me and her, and I was like, I don't feel like spending the money to go to the theater and watch it. And the critics said it was terrible. It got like super bomb reviews, which I could see why, because it does have like some somewhat cheesy parts, but I just tend to look past that. Like if the like the heroic journey of a movie is cool and the action is cool and it's got some heart to it, I'm like, it's okay to be cheesy a little bit.
Yeah, I agree.
And it was honestly very occult.
Really?
Yes, it was very, very occult. And right from the jump, it was just, showing the symbolism. I was like, okay, I'm in for it. And I started taking notes. So the basic premise of the movie was obviously just like in pretty much every single King Arthur myth, pretty much like all of them agree that he had a secret birth. Just like remember in the Merlin story when he goes in, he appears as I can't remember her name, Bridget of Cornwall or something like that. It's different in every myth who he's like born to.
Yeah.
Or Uther Pendragon is the dad, right?
Yeah,
but the mother is like who? It's this guy's wife. It's this guy. I can't remember the name. I think it's Bridget of Cornwall. But anyway, so they all agree that he had this secret birth, and then he's like tucked away, while he's until he grows up to be about like 15 or whatever. What'd you find?
I'm on manlyphall.info reading about his death written by his wife, who believes he actually died on August 28th.
Your birthday.
My
Are you the reincarnation, dude?
Dude.
I'm gonna keep reading.
Oh, that was it.
That was it.
Okay.
Keep reporting, man.
Yeah, I got
That's
excited.
crazy.
Sorry
So-
for the premature pop off.
No, it's good. That's really it's a very strange synchronicity. But so the movie starts. It's like Uther Pendragon. He already has Excalibur, and that's his father, right? And he goes to fight war with, I think in the movie it was Mordred, if I'm not wrong. It wasn't 100% accurate to the actual characters and like the literal story of King Arthur, but like all the elements of it were there. And his father Uther, he's like wielding Excalibur. It's badass, dude. It's like very anime. Like when they wield Excalibur, they have these like incredible like powers and like this magical strength, and like nobody can stand against him. It's super sick. And they're being sieged at Camelot by like, I think it was Mordred, if I'm not mistaken, this one of the mages of the order who turned evil. And he's like attacking them, and then Pendragon whips out the sword, gets up in his base or whatever, lops his head off, and he brings it back to Camelot, and he's like, yeah! Everybody in Camelot, whoa, our king is almighty. But in this story, it's his brother. It's Uther Pendragon's brother, Vortigern, who is, I guess he's like a prince or whatever, because he's the king's brother.
Yeah.
And he's like jealous of his power. He's kind of acting weird. He starts crying when he sees that his brother killed. Again, I'm pretty sure it was Mordred. I didn't pay super attention to that. It was like 2 minutes of the movie this character was in it, and Vortigern is like obviously scheming, right? And then it kind of reveals a little bit of dialogue that he was sent by his brother Uther to study with the mages. So you're like, uh-oh. And then Vortigern, the brother, is acting really weird when they're all having the chat after defeating this evil mage and like ending this war that literally the movie starts with. And he's, Uther's like, hey, to Vortigern's wife, he's like, keep an eye on Vortigern today. He's acting weird. and he walks away. And then you see Vortigern go into this castle, and he's like crying or whatever. He's ringing this bell, and then next thing you know, he just straight up sacrifices his wife.
What?
Like, throws her in the water, dude. He just rips a dagger, dude. He straight up got it in.
Got it in.
Yeah, he just straight up just shanked her, bro.
Whoa.
And he throws her in the water, and you're like, what the hell? And then you see something mysterious like coming at him through the water, and you're like, what is it? Is it a serpent? I don't know what it is. And then the camera like flashes away, and then like Uther goes to his wife. Arthur's a little kid. He's alive.
Yeah.
He's like probably like 5 years old, and Uther wakes up Arthur's mother in the middle of the night. He's like, we got to get the hell out of here. Something's happening. You need to run. And he whips out Excalibur. He goes and he's like fighting off the legions of like bad soldiers or whatever. And then basically he fights this like giant demonic figure that's like, it kind of looked like the dude from Mortal Kombat with the skull mask. What's his name? Shao Kahn. Kind of looked like him, but like full black plate armor and like the kind of like the ram horns and a skull mask. And he's like fucking like
was that demon?
Yeah, and he's like 10 feet tall, and he's got this like double-bladed scythe. And,
is that what was in the water?
No.
Oh.
And he just like Uther is taking his wife and Arthur to this ramp to like get them out of there on a boat, and that the demonic figure is like across the lake, and he just like magically throws the spear like way beyond human strength, kills the mom. Arthur sees it all, so you have this theme of him witnessing the trauma of his parents' death. That's a major part of the movie, and he sees his mother killed, and then Uther's like, oh shit, Arthur, run! And he starts fighting the demon, and he's wielding Excalibur. His eyes are glowing, the sword is glowing, like all the powers or whatever, but it's not enough, and he gets his ass whipped by the demon. So Uther takes the sword, and he throws it up in the air, and then it spins, and it stabs him in the back, and then it turns into the Sword in the Stone. Oh. And Arthur floats away on a boat, and thus we have Arthur growing up in secret. Right? Like every version of the myth. He's growing up at a brothel. He's kind of like training kung fu with the Chinese guy, George. He's like actually like they make jokes about it. Like, you know, he trains all the British soldiers in kung fu. Not soldiers, the rebels.
Oh,
he's like teaching them kung fu and shit. So Arthur's like training kung fu his whole life, which was like really cool. And he grows up, and I'm just like skipping a lot of the fluff and keeping it about the Arthur myth, right? So then he grows up, and you find out that the sword reveals itself. And, and obviously you, as the viewer, know that Vortigern, he becomes king. He betrayed his brother. Yeah. He had the demonic figure, like, do all that. When he sacrificed his wife,
So Vortigern, like, became the stone?
No, Uther did.
Oh, the sword stabbed Uther, and he became the stone.
Vortigern was the demon.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. When he sacrificed his wife
to
this demonic force, he was given this incredible power to like overcome Excalibur. And he became king, and then it's like a long period of darkness where he's like ruling with a fucking iron fist like Sauron, and it's like all the soldiers in these black plates, and you know, the sword reveals itself. So about a quarter of the movie, you see Vortigern go down to that place where he sacrificed his wife, and these sirens come out of the water, these ugly, disgusting sirens. And he's talking to him, and I'm going to read the quote. He says, "Why has the water dropped? Why does the sword reveal itself now?" And the siren said, "As your power increases, so too do the forces that will oppose you. Balance is a law that cannot be transgressed. The born king will come. It is inevitable." So moving forward a little bit, you find out they're testing everybody alive basically in England to like come and like, it's like thousands of people they'll go to cities, and they'll take them in boats to the sword and like make them next
see who it is.
Everybody try to pull it, because he knows that.
Yeah.
He knows it's Arthur. He's his uncle. Right. He's trying to find him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And next, so a sequence of events happen. I'm skipping over really a lot, right? And Arthur shows up, whips that bitch out, and they're like, "Oh shit, it's the born king," right? And he starts becoming a myth. He wields Excalibur. There's like a storm or some shit that happens supernaturally, and everybody around is like, "It's the born king." So there starts to be this force growing where his legend is spreading throughout the land. And finally, Vortigern, and again, this is not even probably halfway through the movie, Vortigern captures Arthur right then because he passes out when he first wields Excalibur. He starts seeing visions of witnessing his mother and father get slaughtered. Shit. Now, granted, this is going somewhere. This is going somewhere alchemical, and then I'm going to spring forth into the alchemical if you guys just stay with me a little longer. So every time he like tries to wield Excalibur initially, he sees visions of his mother and father being slaughtered by this demon, right? And then he passes out from the trauma. He can't activate the power. His mind is in chaos. He's traumatized. It's blocked, right? Yeah. And Vortigern ties him up, calls the whole freaking country. There's tens of thousands of people out in the crowd below the castle, and he's like going to execute him. And basically, a sequence of events happen where like the rebels, who we at the time didn't know about yet, some of the older people from like Uther's rule, I guess, escaped Vortigern and like started a rebellion, loyal to Uther and the Pendragon line. And this mage, it's like Merlin's not really in the movie. You see him one time, you hear about him the whole movie, but he's not the main mage. It's actually a girl, and I can't remember her name. It's not important, but she was badass. And she like had orders from Merlin basically to like kind of help him out. She pulls off some magical stuff and like helps Arthur escape. But right before that, Vortigern says this. He says to Arthur as he's about to cut his head off, he says, "I will let them hate me as long as they fear me. When people fear you, and I mean really fear you, it is the most intoxicating sensation a man can possess. A force of something almost indescribable moves through your blood and takes over you completely." Which I was like, damn, Hollywood, they're
possession type shit.
Yeah, possession,
Hardcore.
Human sacrifice. There's multiple parts of like human sacrifice in this movie, and they were really kind of revealing some stuff. I mean, that is how the Dark Force works. It's all fear. It's all trying to rule through fear, and I thought that was really interesting. How it was like it's so intoxicating and it moves through your blood, and you become consumed with the feeling. And
it sounds like possession the way it's being described.
And he basically was possessed. I mean,
by a demon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But and then he escapes because, like I said, the mage helped him, takes him to the rebels, and I'm gonna move a little quicker now. So she takes him to the rebels, and he like kind of like, fuck you guys, I'm not a rebel, I don't want anything to do with this, I want to go back to my old life. And they're like, nah, you're the born king. Yeah. And he again wields Excalibur, and then he passes out. Every time he wields it, he just literally passes out. He can't do anything. So the mage is like, all right, we got to take him to the Darklands. And the leader of the rebels is like, no, we can't take him to the Darklands. There has to be another way. And she's like, this is the only way.
He won't survive.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. He can't do it alone. And she's like, there's no other way. Oh, shit, we got to take him to the Darklands. So she goes to take him to the Darklands. And
it's like his subconscious.
So in the movie, she takes him to a ritual stone site that looks like a druid circle, that it looks like Stonehenge. Okay, it's very druidic, this movie, and the mages and how they work, and it's like the wargs in Game of Thrones, how they like possess the animals, and there's a lot of that in the movie.
Cool.
The good mages do that, and then the dark ones, they work with demons and stuff. She takes him to the Darklands, and he gets to this like ritual kind of Stonehenge-esque druid circle, and she's like, all right, when you go in there, you got to touch your sword to the altar at the tower. So this kind of like portal opens up, and he's like whisked into this dark dimension where there's like giant monstrous creatures like snakes and rats and bats. It's not like monsters, it's like animals, but they're huge. Massive. Yeah, like Skull Island or something. And they're trying to kill him, and it's like hellish, and he's like barely surviving. He's like limping at the end, and he's like cutting up all these giant snakes and rats, and just like literally just trying to survive. He gets to the temple. He puts his sword on the altar, and because he can hold Excalibur with one hand, and he can like carry it around and stuff, but when he would try to like wield it, then the power would start to grow and he would pass out, right? So he has it with him the whole time. He puts it on the stone, and he starts to see more of the memories of his mother and father, and it's too traumatic, and he sees his mother get killed, then he sees more of the version of what happened when his father dies. He sees the sword toss and then become the stone, which originally he didn't have access to all of these memories. It starts unfolding to him, and then he looks away and he takes the sword from the altar. He doesn't complete vision. And then they pull him out of the Darklands, and lo and behold, he was just sitting there right there at the same spot. And I, tend to think it was his subconscious.
Damn. So they really did just take him into his own subconscious.
Yes. The Darklands.
He's like fighting his dark side, his darkness.
Yeah, his trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she actually says, She tells him, the sword is not resisting you. You are resisting the sword. And then I wrote this down as I was watching the movie. His trauma is holding him back from fulfilling his destiny. They send him to the Darklands, which is an alternate dimension with giant creatures attacking him. They explain that they... Okay, so when he's in the Darklands, the leader of the rebels and the mage are talking, and he's like, he's got to make it out alive. And the mage is like, no, we don't want all of him to make it out of alive. We want his old self to completely die. We want him to be broken down so that he will come from the Darklands
born again,
anew. Right,
Yeah.
Born again,
Yeah.
basically. She didn't say born again,
going
but yeah.
into the underworld and re-emerging, born again.
She said, we want his old self to be completely broken down. You want him to think big, give him something big to think about. So I interpreted that just like you did as the dark night of the soul. He went into the shadow of the subconscious.
Yeah.
You could say, you know, people do that on psychedelics. Maybe in ancient times they were using psychedelics, or maybe they were using meditation and these rituals to get you into these places of the mind and do this shadow work.
We knew they were doing mushrooms. We know they was doing mushrooms.
So Ryan, how old is he at this point?
It doesn't really say, but he's like a grown man. He's like probably in his mid-20s.
Okay, because I've been like seeing a lot about because just listening to you say that makes me think of someone said that the boy has to die for the man to live or the man to be born.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, it sounds similar to me.
Right.
It's
the
the
same
early
concept.
20s would be about that time.
It's sort of like a coming of age /
Right.
like coming into your manhood sort of thing.
Yeah.
So obviously I'm going to skip pretty much the rest of the movie that's not relevant to the Arthur myth, because a lot of like character dynamic and all that fun stuff in a movie takes place. You know, this character dies and you're all sad. A lot of that normal stuff, obviously, but he pretty much... He witnesses some of his friends die when they tried to assassinate Vortigern with a bow at this city where he wasn't like facing him head on. They were trying to assassinate him and be like tactical about it, and it went south. Some of their friends died or whatever, and then he starts to see his friends died. He had the visions of his parents died. The little orphan boy whose father, who was his best friend, you know, now he's an orphan, and he starts to have all these thoughts, and he's like, I don't want to do this. So he goes and he throws his sword into the water to try to abandon it, and he tries to run away through the forest. And then there's like this giant pile of mud, and an arm reaches out, and the lady of the lake pulls him through the puddle of mud, takes him down into the water, which again is the water of his subconscious. The lady of lake returns Excalibur to him and says, let me show you what happens if you do not stop your uncle Vortigern. You are the only one who can stop him. You are the born king. And then she shows a vision of like hell on earth. Because I forgot to say this is very important. All Vortigern was trying to do was build a tower, which ding, 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 Tower of Babel. Yeah, he's building it. And every time he adds a level, his magical power increases. And he's like trying to build it all the way to the top. And Arthur's like, I don't want to be that guy, you know? And she's like, here's what's going to happen if he completes the tower. And it's literally like hell on earth. Like cities and everywhere is razed and on fire, and people are suffering and in famine and all this. And she says, you know, you got to trust the mage. She's helping you, you know, achieve your destiny, take the sword Excalibur and, you know, go and become the born king or whatever. So then he comes from the water wielding the sword. He holds it up to the sky. It's like storming, which is obviously symbolic. You know, you have thunder going on, and he's claiming Excalibur, that he's going to wield it, which we'll talk about that in the alchemical process too. But then he goes, he gets back to the rebels after abandoning them. They're like, where the hell you been? And he's like, you know, don't worry about it. And they're like, well, what are we going to do? He's like, we're going to walk right in the fucking front door and we're going to take his ass out. And
Get his ass.
And he's like, let's go. And he shows up, and basically for the first time, actually there was one time before he wielded Excalibur on accident and it controlled him. And it was super cool. But then he goes and wields it for real, and he obviously has like this crazy supernatural power, defeats like a legion of soldiers, fights Vortigern, gets his ass whipped the first time. Like just totally just like mollywopped Arthur. He falls down, he's about to kill his ass, and then Arthur starts seeing the full memory. What really happened. But it was weird because originally when the sword spins and then it lands in the stone, in this version of the memory, Arthur caught the sword before it goes into his father. So he kind of like was changing the past a little bit in his mind. He was like overwriting the trauma, and he catches the sword, and then his father looks at him and he's like, basically like, you know, this is your sword, you're the born king. He takes it, and then he wields it, whips Vortigern's ass, and he says, "You created me, and for that I bless you. You make sense of the devil." So instead of cursing him, he took the path of light. He defeated him, not that he wanted to, out of revenge and spite, but he did it because he
out of
had
necessity.
to be the righteous leader and protect the people. He, the Christ-like king, right? And then when he kills him, he actually grabs his hands and he's like, "Uncle, I bless you." Even though he's like sitting there dying, and he's like, blah, 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 talking shit to him. He's like, "You asked me what gave me the drive to do this. You did. And for that, I thank you. I bless you. You have made sense of the devil." And I took that as an interpretation of like the demonic forces or the dark forces in our life, or the devil, or whatever you could think about that allegory, however you want to believe that, exists for a purpose to help you awaken.
Yeah, that's what he meant by make sense of the devil.
Right.
It gives it context and meaning, and like it made sense to him. Like, that's dope as hell.
Right.
I kind of want to watch this.
It's super cool, dude. It has like, again, it's nowhere near the quality of Lord of the Rings, like at all. Like if Lord of the Rings is a 10, it's like a 5 in terms of like, the cinematography and all that, good high craft stuff. But it's pretty sick, dude. It has like a Lord of the Rings vibe, if that makes sense. Like
vibes are important in a movie.
The high fantasy of it.
Yeah.
But it is nowhere near, like, don't go expecting that level of quality. But it
sounds cool.
It's cool, dude.
Yeah, I want to check it out.
It's super cool. Like the action's cool. There's a weird thing about the movie that I probably think is why they rated it so bad. And the pacing of the movie is like downright comical. And this is something about movies that I do not like. And this movie is full of them. And it's like montages to rush the lapse of time. So it's like, if you can look past it, it's a great movie.
Yeah. Cool.
It's super cool. It was like the epitome of the hero's journey, supernatural power, all that stuff. And I feel like we're missing that a lot nowadays in movies. But anyway, before I get into the final part here, I wanted to talk about the Battle of Evermore synchronicity from Led Zeppelin. The lyrics. The Queen of Light took her bow. I'm not going to read all the lyrics, just the ones I highlighted that are relevant to this. The Queen of Light took her bow, and then she turned to go. The Prince of Peace embraced the gloom and walked the night alone. Dance in the dark of night, the trauma, the Negrito, the first stage of the alchemical process, being in the darkness and the confusion. I can't see all my memories. I can't access Excalibur and my supernatural power because I'm broken and feel like shit, dancing in the dark of night, but we're looking to the morning light, right? The second phase, I think it's called albedo, the whitening, the purification, the awakening into the power. I'm waiting for the angels of Avalon, waiting for the eastern glow, the sun, the light of the sun, the spiritual force. The magic runes are written gold to bring the balance back, bring it back. At last the sun is shining, the clouds of blue roll by. With flames from the dragon of darkness, the sunlight blinds his eyes. Which I thought that was cool about the balance thing, because in the movie it said the law of balance is a force that cannot be transgressed. As you grow in power, so too will be the force that opposes you. Yeah. The born king will come, right? And then I wanted to remind people of the Manly P. Hall quote when it says, with the flames from the dragon of darkness, the sunlight blinds his eyes. And the personality of Arthur is to be found a new form of the ever-recurrent cosmic myth. The Prince of Britain is the sun, his knights are the zodiac, and his flashing sword may be the sun's ray with which he fights and vanquishes the dragons of darkness. Or it may represent the earth's axis. Yada, yada, yada. I read the quote earlier. Crazy that Led Zeppelin was on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They got all that symbolism and shit on them album covers. They knew what was up.
Oh, yeah. So now we're going to get into the last phase, the alchemical stages of the Arthur myth. So basically, from the esoteric perspective, you could look at King Arthur as the 4 steps of the alchemical process. Step 1, Negrito, the blackening. So the blackening stage is the first phase, and it represents a period of decay, dissolution, purification, setting the groundwork for transformation to occur. It involves the breakdown of the alchemist's material and spiritual essence. In the physical realm, this means the decomposition and putrefaction of substances. Spiritually, it denotes the death of the old self, confronting one's darkest aspects and inner turmoil. The only way, he's got to go to the Darklands.
Yeah.
They're showing you.
Yeah.
Or just like Luke Skywalker, bro, when he's training with Yoda, he has to go into this dark little swamp to
musky
face
swamp.
Darth Vader. It's in every great hero's journey myth.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The symbolism of blackness represents the unconscious, the darkness, and the chaos. And traditionally, when people go through initiation ceremonies in these secret mystery traditions, they tend to start wearing black in some orders, and then once initiated, wear white.
A symbol of the purification process.
Exactly. It is associated with the initial state of confusion and disorientation, akin to the dark night of the soul, where the individual must confront and integrate their shadow. It's linked to psychological disintegration. It signifies the breaking down of the ego and false identities, leading to a deeper understanding of one's true self. Spiritually, it marks the beginning of the purification process, where old beliefs and negative patterns are dismantled. Alchemically, the process might involve the fermentation or rotting of materials to produce a black substance. These physical processes serve as metaphors for the inner transformation occurring within the alchemist. It can be likened to the concept of death, where the individual undergoes a symbolic death representing the end of old ways of being and thinking. This parallels the alchemist's goal of achieving a new state of existence through the destruction of the old self. The completion of Nigredo leaves the alchemist in a state of raw potential. The chaos and disintegration of the stage are necessary for the subsequent phases of the great work or the magnum opus of alchemy, preparing the alchemist for renewal and enlightenment. I will say that everybody in my life that I've ever met, just having this crazy journey of, being a UFO experiencer and kind of like having had contact with so many people reaching out to us about this, everybody I've ever met in my life that's like, dude, I feel like I'm going through an awakening process, I'm waking up. Everybody I've ever met, by the hundreds, if not thousands, I swear, bro, they tend to always go into some initial period of suffering when they realize what they thought they knew is not what they knew.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that makes sense according to the phases of alchemical.
It's also exactly what happened in the Arthur myth. They literally said that part of him has to die in order for him to awaken like his true self.
This is why in these ancient mystery traditions, they would perform these ceremonial ritual initiations where they would imitate dying and being reborn. That's why they have the myth of Osiris laying in the coffin, or the story of Jesus dying and resurrecting. In the Arthurian context of Nigredo, his early life, and I'm not talking about the movie, I'm talking about
the myth.
The Arthur myth. His early life is shrouded in mystery and secrecy. Born out of wedlock to Uther Pendragon and Igraine, he is hidden away by Merlin to protect him from those who might harm him. This period represents the chaos and uncertainty of Nigredo, where his true potential as a future king is obscured. The kingdom of Britain is in turmoil, lacking a strong leader. Uther's death plunges the land into disorder, with various factions vying for his power. The societal chaos mirrors the psychological and spiritual disintegration of Nigredo, where old structures must break down to make way for renewal. His hidden potential, Arthur's, is like the raw material in alchemy that must undergo transformation. His upbringing away from the court under Merlin's guidance in secret is the preparatory stage where his latent qualities are nurtured in secret. The second phase, albedo, referred to as the whitening stage, is a critical phase in the journey of the awakening of the soul towards spiritual and material transformation. The transition from Nigredo to albedo symbolizes moving from chaos and confusion to a state of clarity and enlightenment. Purification and cleansing. Albedo involves these steps to cleanse the alchemist's material and spiritual essence. In the physical realm, this means the separation of pure substances from impurities. Spiritually, it denotes the cleansing of the soul, removing the metaphorical darkness and shadows that clouds one's true nature. Whiteness in the albedo phase represents purity, light, and truth. It is associated with the illumination of the mind and spirit, akin to the dawn breaking through the night, bringing new understanding and awareness. Albedo is often linked to a rebirth or awakening. In psychological terms, it signifies the integration of the conscious and unconscious mind, leading to a greater self-awareness and insight. Spiritually, it marks the attainment of a higher state of being, where the individual is more in tune with their true self and the divine. Alchemically, it involves the washing of a substance to rid it of impurities, or the heating of materials to produce a white ash. These physical processes serve as metaphors for the inner transformation occurring within the alchemist. It can be likened to the concept of baptism, where the individual undergoes a ritual washing in water, symbolizing the removal of sin and the rebirth into a life of spiritual purity. This parallels the alchemist's goal of achieving a state of spiritual and moral clarity. The completion of albedo brings a sense of inner peace and balance. The chaos and turmoil of nigredo are left behind, and the alchemist experiences new harmony and equilibrium. This stage prepares the individual for the subsequent phases of the great work, the magnum opus, leading ultimately to the philosopher's stone and the attainment of enlightenment and immortality. In the Arthurian context, and I'm halfway done here, and then we're done. Halfway done with these phases, you know?
Yeah.
In the Arthurian context, Arthur pulling Excalibur from the stone or receiving it from the Lady of the Lake symbolizes his rightful claim to the throne and the purification of his lineage. I did forget to say this detail, but in the movie, it was really cool how they made Excalibur, because it was Uther was the king, and like Merlin was kind of like his friend and counselor. He was like one of the heads of the order. He goes to this evil dark mage, steals his staff, forges it as Excalibur, and I think he throws it to the Lady of the Lake, who then gives it to Uther, or maybe it was the other way around. Maybe he gives it to the Lady of the Lake, and then she gives it back to Merlin. Either way. And in the movie, Merlin binds the sword Excalibur to the Pendragon bloodline, which I thought was really cool. That's why Arthur could wield it, even though it was his father's before him, you know?
Yeah.
So Arthur pulling Excalibur from the stone in the real myth, or receiving it from the Lady of the Lake, it's different in every version, symbolizes his rightful claim to the throne, his divine right to have this supernatural power, and the purification of his lineage. This act is albedo, where his potential is actualized. He has awakened, and he steps into his role as the destined born king. Establishing Camelot represents the creation of a new enlightened order, a harmonious utopian order. Camelot is a symbol of purity, justice, and rivalry, embodying the principles of albedo. The round table, with its emphasis on equality, where everyone is equally at the table, and noble deeds, reflects the purification and enlightenment associated with this stage. The formation of the Knights of the Round Table, dedicated to the upholding of chivalric ideals, further exemplifies the purification and spiritual enlightenment of this stage. These knights are not just warriors, but also paragons of virtue, embodying the illuminated mind and spirit. Citrinitas, the third phase, the yellowing. It represents the spiritual awakening and the manifestation of the inner light following the purification of albedo. It involves the awakening of the material and spiritual essence. In the physical realm, this means that the material begins to exhibit a golden hue. It's becoming gold. Spiritually, it denotes the dawning of wisdom and enlightenment, the emergence of the inner light. Yellow in Citrinitas represents the sun, light, and consciousness. It's associated with the illumination of the mind and spirit, akin to the rising sun that brings clarity and understanding after the darkness of light. It's linked to the integration of knowledge and wisdom in the psyche. It is the merging of conscious insight with the previously unconscious elements of the mind, leading to profound spiritual insight. Spiritually, it marks the blossoming of one's inner light and the beginning of a deeper spiritual understanding. Alchemically, it involves the heating of substances to produce a yellow or golden color. These physical processes serve as metaphors for the inner awakening occurring within the alchemist. Citrinitas can be linked to the concept of enlightenment, where the individual awakens in the emergence of light and knowledge, like the coming of the sun. This parallels the alchemist's goal of achieving a state of heightened awareness and spiritual clarity. It's the preparatory phase for the final phase of alchemy, which is rubido, which I thought was weird. The ruby, I like that. Like, remember we talked about in the Stargate episode the missing ruby at the Sphinx? You know, leading ultimately to the Philosopher's Stone in the great work, the attainment of perfection. In the Arthurian context, the various quests undertaken by the Knights of the Round Table, especially the quest for the Holy Grail, symbolize the journey towards spiritual awakening and enlightenment. These quests are trials that test the knight's virtues, wisdom, and spiritual resolve, aligning with the Citrinitas stage. Arthur's reign is marked by wisdom and justice, reflecting his enlightened state. He embodies the integration of physical and spiritual power, guiding his knights and kingdom towards higher ideals. This period of his rule represents the blossoming of wisdom and the illumination of Citrinitas. His wise governance and the harmonious function of Camelot under his leadership exemplify the spiritual awakening and integration of knowledge associated with this phase. His reign is a period of prosperity. It's like a golden age of peace and enlightenment, where the kingdom reflects the inner light of its ruler and its knights. And then the final stage, rubido, the reddening. It represents the achievement of the great work, the magnum opus, and the attainment of spiritual and material perfection, or as a Rosicrucian might say, the attainment of God in man, or as Rudolf Steiner would say, the awakening of the inner God-man, the God within. Rubido involves the integration of the alchemist's material and spiritual essence into a unified whole. In the physical realm, this means the material achieves a red or golden red hue. Spiritually, it denotes the culmination of the transformative process, resulting in a complete and perfected self. Red in Rubido represents the Philosopher's Stone. Harry Potter, bro.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've been thinking that the whole time.
Red little gem.
Is the Philosopher's Stone typically depicted as a red gem? It is.
I mean, it is according to the...
Mini.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
in Full Metal Alchemist, it is.
Yep. Wow.
It represents the Philosopher's Stone, the stone, the sun at its peak, and the fullness of life. It is associated with the final stage of transformation where the alchemist attains spiritual and material mastery, psychological and spiritual unification of the self. It signifies the integration of all aspects of the psyche, leading to a state of wholeness and complete harmony. It marks the realization of one's true divine nature and the union with the divine. Alchemically, the process might involve the production of a red substance, such as the Philosopher's Stone, the red elixir. I believe they call this the prima materia. The physical processes serve as metaphors for the inner completion occurring within the alchemist. It can be likened to the concept of resurrection, where the individual undergoes a spiritual rebirth. The phoenix, right? At the top of the Embassy of the Free Mind, the final room in the museum was called the Phoenix Room.
Did it have a phoenix in it?
It might have had a diagram of a phoenix, but it was just a bunch of other magical diagrams and
That's so cool. I
artifacts
gotta see
and things.
pictures of this place.
Yeah, for sure. I got you. But I just thought it was cool that the final room is the Phoenix Room.
Yeah.
Rubido, you've awakened.
Wow.
You know? Symbolizing the emergence of a new, perfected self. This parallels the alchemist's goal of achieving immortality and ultimate enlightenment. The completion of Rubido brings a sense of perfection and mastery. The integration and unification of this stage is the attainment of the great work, where the alchemist achieves spiritual and material perfection, symbolized by the Philosopher's Stone. In the Arthurian context, the quest for the Holy Grail is the ultimate spiritual journey, seeking the highest form of enlightenment and union with the divine. The Grail quest is the pinnacle of the knight's spiritual endeavors, embodying the Rubido stage, where the great work is achieved. Arthur's final battle with Mordred and his subsequent journey to Avalon, which is why I brought up the Led Zeppelin song too, Waiting for the Angels of Avalon, waiting for the Eastern Glow. Avalon is like the heaven of the Arthur myth. It's like this,
Right.
or
Yes.
it's like
Valhalla,
or
kind of
in
thing,
Lord of the
or
Rings, whatever they call it.
the
where the elves
Undying
go.
Lands.
Yeah, it's like that.
Valinor. Yeah.
Arthur's final battle with Mordred and his journey to Avalon symbolized the culmination of his earthly journey and his transition to a higher state of being. Avalon is the mystical and eternal place which represents the attainment of spiritual and material perfection, akin to the Philosopher's Stone. The Grail, often confused with Arthur's kingdom, suggests that the kingdom itself is a reflection of the Grail's divine nature. This union represents the harmonious integration of the material and spiritual realms, achieving the ultimate goal of the alchemical work. His journey to Avalon, where he is said to heal and return when needed by mankind, reflects the immortality and eternal perfection of Rubido. It signifies the birth and renewal of the true king, embodying the Philosopher's Stone promise of eternal life and perfected wisdom. Once you achieve the immortality of Rubido and you awaken to the state of perfection, the God within man, you've achieved the Philosopher's Stone, then you can sit in the Siege Perilous.
The seat.
Yes.
The chair.
Yep. The seat of the perfect man. It's always empty, waiting to be filled by that perfect man who's seeking the Grail. So that's pretty deep. That's why in the beginning I wanted to talk about the dark death of King Arthur in every myth, because then at the end we talk about what it really means.
Right, and how it's
his
necessary.
ascension to the spirit world.
Yes, it's a necessary part of his journey to ascension.
Yeah.
Yeah, the diving into this really like contextualizes the Grail myth and the Philosopher's Stone myth. It like really connects all the pieces and fills out the picture in a really beautiful way. And I still can't help but be mind blown that, I mean, over 1,000 years ago, and for hundreds of consecutive years, people have been like weaving this elaborate allegory of these like archetypal alchemical lessons, and like it's really beyond my own, like I can't even fathom putting all of that stuff together and then weaving it into such a beautiful story, and probably out of necessity, right? Like,
Right.
because if they just wrote this stuff down as it is and then they're caught with it, like they could be killed, they could be, they're persecuted for these beliefs and trying to pass this knowledge along. Like, these stories and these allegories probably came out of necessity. Like, they had to
Right.
do it this way.
I used to think like, wow, why do they keep all this stuff secret? But lately I have been kind of like I was telling Jenny the other day, like, I still am, I believe like truth should be free. It
Yeah.
should be spread. But I'm starting to understand why the initial secrecy, because like these dudes were being killed.
They were
for
being
talking-
killed.
Like literally slaughtered.
Absolutely. For ages and ages and ages, and by different enemies, by different groups. They're being hunted and persecuted, and like, and still to this day, there's a lot of stifling of this kind of information. Like, it's
Right.
kind of still being persecuted. Like,
I feel like, when you first, especially coming from a Christian background and having that original lens, your initial thought is like, oh, this is, dark occult, like they're keeping these secrets, and,
Yeah.
it's, and like, I used to think about things like, why would they keep it secret? Knowledge should be free. But now I'm kind of like, dang, like, I guess where I'm coming from is like, the world absolutely was not ready
right.
for all of this stuff to be out in the open.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy to think about, like, from a new lens, especially after going to the embassy in Amsterdam.
Look into history. Persecuted groups always turn their knowledge and their stories into art. That's how it gets passed along. That's the only way they can pass it along.
Right.
Without dying or being persecuted or punished for passing that knowledge along. They turn it into art so that it's like a little bit more covert.
But also immortalized.
Absolutely. Yeah. It'll be appreciated forever. And it's, I mean, it's really genius. And I kind of just, as we're doing this episode, came to that same realization that, like, oh, no, of course this stuff is all being hidden in allegories and these elaborate stories. It's because these people were being killed.
Literally.
Yeah.
Hunted, slaughtered.
And
like,
that like kind of makes these stories that much more beautiful.
Yeah, it really does contextualize it when you like look at that for like the actual historical lens.
Yeah.
And like see, like, I don't know, man. It's just like, I feel like that trip to Amsterdam and being at the embassy and like spending just an hour there reading everything on the walls and the pamphlets and like seeing the history and like the persecution of it in Europe, and I'm like sitting in the
in a place where it was happening.
Yeah, and I'm sitting right there reading all this stuff. I'm like, oh my God. Like I feel like it helped me like recontextualize these things. Could you see while I was researching this stuff, I was like, I don't even care to talk about like if he was real or not.
Right. Yeah.
I want to focus on this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's clear that it's allegory, and it's very important allegory, and like that doesn't make it any less significant.
There was one other thing I wanted to mention, because it ties to the Merlin episode, and I thought this was really cool. This is a summary. I thought I would. Let's be honest. I knew this was going to take a long time, but I have way more, and I'm like, it would probably be at least another hour, and I'm like, maybe another time we can go into this. But I'm going to read a small excerpt from another part of this research that I gathered. And there was this brilliant video I watched on YouTube. I'm going to give a shout out. I'm doing like a 24-hour fast right now. So that's why I'm like, it kind of makes it a little, I feel like I'm like struggling with my words today, dude. But anyway, so YouTube video summary of Numinous Daemon. And this video is called The Hidden Alchemy in King Arthur's Story. It's like 20 minutes. It's super brilliant. And I have the entire transcript that I pulled from YouTube and like removed a lot of the fluff out of it. And I was going to go over this entire like 20-minute video, but it would take way longer than that. So I'm going to read this part that I think you'll really like. Let me find it. Okay. Merlin complements Arthur's physical might with spiritual wisdom, paralleling the Hindu relationship between Kshatriya, the warrior king, and the Brahmin, or the wise sage. The Knights of the Round Table are bound by spiritual commitments, which reflects an initiatic brotherhood like the Freemasonry. So, like, in this video, The Hidden Alchemy of Arthur, it's really cool because it goes like way deeper into some of the symbolism and even like relates it to like the Atlantis myth and Hyperborea, which is a Greek myth. Are you familiar with it?
Yeah.
You know, like the giants that live beyond the wall, and there's some versions of Hyperborea suggest that actually it like predates Atlantis, and that like the Atlantean people may have come from Hyperborea. It's like, again, this is all like ancient conjecture, but it's very fun to read and talk about. But I thought you'd like that Arthur and Merlin connection, like. The Arthur and the Merlin archetypes are merged, that either one can't be fulfilled without the other.
Yeah, there is a lot of like there are a lot of similarities, and there's a lot of overlap between the myths.
And this is an archetype that predates the Arthur legend in the ancient Hindu texts.
Yeah.
Right? That's super cool.
Way older. Way older.
Yeah.
And so who knows? The people who wrote these Arthurian myths, they could have been studying that Hindu knowledge. They
absolutely, absolutely, they could have.
Yeah,
I suspect that was way more common in the ancient past than we have been led to believe in modern times. Because again, I can speak from my experience growing up as a Christian. You think they're all separate.
Yes.
You think like the Christians are the Christians and the Hindus and the Hindus and the Buddhists are the Buddhists. But I suspect that like these people back in the day knew a lot more about each other than we commonly think today. And that they were like very much privy to each other's texts. And like we have all these stories. Dude, The Secret Teaching of the All Ages, I'm definitely going to talk about this in a future Wisdom Tradition episode. He goes into great detail about Plato being an initiate of the Eleusis mysteries and Pythagoras, and how he traveled to these other places and learned from Egypt and India. And like I'm really starting to think that like that's way more common than we think.
Oh, I'm sure, especially amongst these like mystics, and like they're collecting knowledge from everywhere to study the similarities and like the symbolic truths behind them.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, we just grew up Christian and being told like it's evil to look at that other stuff.
Right.
That's just our experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I just, man, I feel like, according to The Secret Teaching of All Ages, dude, it's like a lot of these Western traditions were influenced by Eastern traditions. Like I'm talking like thousands of years ago.
I'm certain. It just predates it by such a long time. I'm certain there's influence there. There has to be.
It's wild.
Yeah.
Super wild. But that's all I got, man. That's all I got on the Arthur stuff.
Incredible stuff. That was awesome. That was so cool. I'm gonna
You've anything to report, man? You've been over there researching Manly P. Hall. Did you just let the case go cold, or just like his real murder?
He's gaslighting.
Yeah, actually, these guys I think killed him in an RV.
I feel like
that's
Alex
what the wife believes.
You just stared too far into the abyss.
No, to be honest, I've really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the alchemical process link to Arthur.
Yeah,
I appreciate
not knowing much about Arthur and knowing a little bit about the alchemical process. I did enjoy this episode.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. I do know that you know a lot about Hercules, but
I was literally gonna say that.
I thought you'd appreciate. Maybe there'd be some parallels.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Maybe a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're both heroes, right?
They're both buff.
You think about
Hot dudes.
Well, I don't know. It's a little different. I started thinking. I'm hesitant to put myself on camera because of my posture here, but
it's impeccable.
Feet up. Anyway, I've got to thinking about the colors of the Catholic priests and how they relate to the colors of the alchemical process. And I think it's interesting that when Catholic priests are not preaching, they're dressed in all black. When they are preaching, they're dressed in white.
Really?
Yeah, can
you say that again? When they're not preaching,
when they're doing church duties and when they're going about their daily life,
they're in black.
Generally, black shirt, black pants, black belt, and a white collar.
Okay.
The little
like the traditional thing we always see.
And again, this is just Catholicism, and this is just from my personal
background in Catholicism.
Right. And then when they go to preach, they put on top of that a white, like, I don't know, the official
robe or whatever.
Yeah. And then what's interesting is then the bishops who are above the, like, think of bishops as like the general manager or the regional manager. They wear black all the time.
Okay.
Even
and
while
their
they're
robe, yes, their robe is black.
Uh-huh.
But then above them are cardinals, which I believe either wear black or red or a combination of that. Above the cardinals is the Pope, who wears white.
Red rings a bell. Like, I feel like cardinals have some red in their coloring.
So it's just interesting. Like, I don't know if it's like a perversion of the alchemical process or if it's their own thing.
Or maybe it's not an overt perversion. Maybe it's just like over time that has, we talk about this in many previous episodes about like the unconscious pulling on the symbolism. Like we talk about this in the context of art, which I am now all in.
Well, also,
all
if you think,
in,
like,
that's what occurs.
I've talked about why I wear all white on the show. And that is like, it makes you more receptive to energies. So maybe it's just the sense that when the priest is not preaching, he's keeping to himself, like conserving his energy, keeping his energy within and reflecting deflecting everything else. And then when he goes to do his job in front of the community and the congregation, he switches to white to become one with that energy around him.
Excuse me, sir, where is your polo?
I wore a t-shirt today. Mm. You don't know the real reason?
Yeah.
When I ride the motorcycle, the collar flies around.
That's awesome.
Wow.
Epic.
Yeah, this was a fun one.
Yeah,
I hope you guys enjoyed it.
Glad I could weigh in at the end to prove I was paying attention.
With your feet kicked up, man.
Yeah. Love y'all.
Love you guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to see more, check out our other videos.
And before you go, don't forget to subscribe. See you next week. Peace.